At InDigital, we know the public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
August 24th, 2016, the I Am 911 movement is born. One of my personal stories set the tone for this movement. What started out as a way to raise awareness for the reclassification issue for dispatchers quickly turned into peer support. 911 professionals from all over the world were sharing their stories. On Facebook alone, at that time, the engagements were over 34 million. It spawned a peer support session at conferences called Imagine Listening, where dispatchers shared their stories out loud or on paper. For years, I have been asked if this would ever become a book, coming June 2023, and available now for pre-order on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. From Titletown Publishing, Imagine Listening, Your Worst Day is Our Everyday. If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo of the Code 7 Podcast Network, and we're about to get started here with Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader in next-gen core services, and a big shout-out, as always, to subscribers of the podcast. Thank you so much for everything, and I am super excited today. We're about to get into this. This started last month, May, when I was at the Florida APCO conference, and everything the ball just got rolling and all. So we're just going to jump right into it. My guest today, I'm very honored, and thank you so much, sir, for taking this time to be here with me. But this is Sheriff Grady Judd. How are you?
I'm wonderful, Ricardo. How are you today?
You know, I'm doing good. A little nervous, coming in and everything, but also not just this, but seeing just the complex. I didn't realize that when I was working for Frostproof Police Department back in 2001, when I started my public safety career, that the county was as big as it actually is. I was living in my little town there.
Well, in 2001, the population wasn't near what it is today. You know, we have 787,000 people here. 4 people an hour are moving into this county.
What?
That's right. In the last 4 years, 110,000 people will have moved in this county by the end of the year if our projections hold up this year. And the county's 2,000 square miles. Mm-hmm. So you think about that. We're almost at 800,000 people, 2,000 square miles, and I have over 1,100 deputies, as a matter of fact.
Wow. Again, being in Frostproof, small area, had no idea. There's 2 traffic lights, you know. I was there. Actually, the way it got started, I ended up going just to visit family for 2 weeks, ended up staying 3.5 years, started my career there and all, and it has been an amazing experience ever since.
Well, Frostproof is still God's country, and you know how many traffic lights they have now? 2.
Okay. I was like, wait, did I miss one?
No.
I was there just the other day.
Yes, 2. It had 2 20 years ago. It has 2 today. It's God's country down there.
For sure. And, you know, every time, and I tell people this all the time, but every time I go to Frostproof, I always go back to where the original building was, where I started out, and I just kind of stand on that plot of land and reflect, because it's been an amazing 22-year career that I've had in public safety, and I will never forget where I started.
You know, Ricardo, it's hard to believe. I have over 150 people that work in my communications center. That is unbelievable when you think where we came from, because I was born and raised here as well. So I remember this as a sleepy little sheriff's office in a sleepy little county when I started 51 years ago. And now it's a major metropolitan area, but still at the south end of the county, it's still farming and ranches and what I call the Polk County that I remember from when I was a kid.
Wow.
The north end is a metro area.
So how did you get started in public safety to begin with?
I've wanted to be in law enforcement my entire life, from the time I was 4 or 5 years old, as far back as I can remember. And I wanted to be the sheriff. And I really believe it's my mission field. I think this was what God intended for me all along. So at the ripe old age of 16, I first went to work as an ambulance technician, okay? Ambulance attendant. That was even before EMTs and paramedics. Then when we started the first EMT program at Polk State College, which was then Polk Community, I attended that. So I was an EMT, and you could work in the ambulance business back then. It wasn't government work. And truly, the ambulance was simply a method to get you to the hospital for treatment. So other than a few patches for wounds and some splints for broken bones and a little oxygen, it was pretty remote compared to today. So I graduated from high school. I already had my application filled out because, quite frankly, I tried to apply while I was in high school and they wouldn't hire me. So I graduated from high school. The next week, I ran down to the personnel office, turned in my application, and the guy looked at me and said, "You're 18 years old." And I said, "Yes." I was all excited. I thought I was grown up. He said, "We just had to fire a kid that we hired as an 18-year-old. And I just don't think the sheriff's going to hire any more people your age." I was so deflated. Because I'd worked on the ambulance, I'd worked with the deputies and the troopers and the city police officers, and I always wanted to be in law enforcement. I went home just crushed. And then I had an idea. So I knew some guys that were deputies, and I said, "Hey, who was in charge of the communication center, which we call the radio room back in the day?" And they told me Captain Lockwood, and there was this Lieutenant, Wally Edwards. He is still my friend today. So I went down there and I said, I work for the ambulance. I'm going to college nights and weekends. I've got my high school sweetheart. And I know y'all are not ready to hire an 18-year-old. Can I hang out here on my nights off? And they looked at me and go, "Yeah, I guess." So I'm 18 years of age. And after my date, because I had to have my wife home by midnight,
Right.
who wasn't my wife at the time. Now we're home by 10. I would run down to the communication center or the radio room, and I would hang out. Well, I worked at the ambulance, so I knew how to dispatch on a micro level, a small level, but not a large level. And so I would hang out there, and occasionally someone would get up to go to the restroom, and they'd say, "You want to dispatch?" I'd say, "Sure." And for 5 or 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I would dispatch. I knew how to do it. So this went on for about a month. And one morning, the captain came in, and I had been there all night long. He said, "Kid, how long are you going to hang out at this sheriff's office?" And I said, "Captain, until you hire me. You see, I'm going to be the sheriff one day, and I need to get started." And he laughed at me. And then 3 days later, I got a phone call. He said, "Come in here. I want to talk to you." He said, "I've talked to the sheriff." And he said, "Anybody who would come down here and offer to work for free, we ought to at least give them a chance." So on the 21st of July in 1972 was the first day I was paid to work with the sheriff's office. And at that time, they started me as a dispatcher because I knew the codes and I knew how to dispatch. And I had hung out there for probably 5 or 6 weeks and saw how the paperwork system went. And I started dispatching, and that's where I was. If you remember back in the day, if you're old enough, we were sending young men to Vietnam to fight a war, and they were complaining that they couldn't come back home because they were not yet 21 and drink a beer and watch a football game in a pub or a bar. So they lowered the legal age to 18. So the sheriff then sent me to the police academy. And then he put me on the road. I was the first deputy sheriff under the age of 21. I went on the road as a deputy when I was only 19, after spending about 19 months in the communications center. But communications is so stressful that my heart is always with my communication folks. And I can remember some days or some nights we were much smaller, but we didn't have as many dispatchers and complaint takers, that you would be so emotionally and mentally fried that when we come off of the board, is what we called it, that you would have to sit down and kind of catch your breath before you could walk to the car to leave.
Wow.
And that's how it all started. And then you fast forward 32 years later, 5 sheriffs later, my last sheriff retired. I ran for election, and I'm so grateful that the people of Polk County elected me in 2004 as their sheriff and continue to elect me to this day. And next year, I will be running for my 6th term as sheriff in Polk County.
Wow. That is amazing. I mean, the way, you started out and everything, but you already had that idea. You had the thought where this is your goal. This is where you wanted to be, and you did it.
It was my dream. And I truly think, that's why I say it's a God thing. I never wavered from that. As kids, you want to do this and you want to do that, or you hit a roadblock. Many people, once they turn that application in at 18, and the personnel director looked at you and said, "Kid, we just fired an 18-year-old. I don't think the sheriff's going to hire anybody else." They would have given up and gone on.
Truth, yes.
Well, I just dug in deeper because I thought, no way. I'm going to be the sheriff one day, and I want to work at the sheriff's office. So I just credit the good Lord with giving me the tenacity not to give up and not to give in, but to push forward, because this is not only a career. This is my life. I wake up most mornings before the alarm goes off, even after all these years, to come to work, because I know I'm going to be able to help someone today. I'm going to be able to make a positive change in the community. So I am totally, totally, totally excited for the opportunity to be the sheriff and to work at the sheriff's office.
What were some of the things that really fascinated you, like really pushed you into this career? And, you had it also on the side of dispatch. I was 19 when I started in dispatch. And I remember the first night I walk into Frostproof PD, I was working a midnight shift, and I walk in, I meet my trainer, he shows me things, and he takes a 911 call, and I thought, this is fascinating. Like, this is amazing. And then he turns around and looks at me and he goes, "Okay, you're next." And I thought he was joking with me. And I kind of chuckled and said, "No, for real?" And he goes, "No, I'm serious." He goes, You're next." And I said, "There's nothing else to this?" And he goes, "Ricardo, you have to work at this." And, we weren't taking medicals or anything like that, but what he had told me was, you have to have thick skin, and you have to be human and have common sense. But that was the main thing, was you have to be human. And just all of public safety just really fascinated me. What were some of the things that really pushed you towards it?
Sure, Ricardo. And I want to comment first that That's how it was then.
Yeah.
That's how we learned. That's how I learned. But do you know now you have to have over 300 hours training before you can answer the phone? And I still struggle with that. I told the legislators when they decided that they would do that, not fund it, but do that, let us teach in blocks and allow people to do one job and then give them more training for the next block and more training for the next block, which is what we did as a professional agency. Mm-hmm. Many agencies trained just like you're talking about at that time. So that training is really, really difficult. And that's how this regional dispatch center that I'm in charge of came about. The small police departments struggle with keeping people as dispatchers or communication specialists because of the arduous amount of hours that you had to put in. And then they'd get someone trained up and we'd have an opening here at the county and pay better. And they would lose and start all over. So I dispatch for the overwhelming majority of the police departments and the fire departments and obviously EMS, ambulance, fire rescue, because it is now a profession. When you and I started, 18 and 19-year-old kids did this. And it was, hey, answer the phone, be nice, get the information, and send an officer.
Right.
And they'll figure it out when they get there.
Yeah.
But it's, I have told folks along the way, in this world, there are things that scar you for life.
Yes.
There are memories that you can't unremember. There are sights that you can't unsee. And you have to learn how to manage that. But along the way, especially as a dispatcher, the first responder, you are the ones that tie the emergency to the responders and make sure the help gets on scene. And when people experience a true emergency, now we all know working in a 911 center, we get calls of people who are lonely and want to talk, and they ask things they shouldn't. What time's the ball game? Is it going to rain tomorrow? Which is totally inappropriate.
Right.
But mixed in with all of that are people that for the first time in their life, and probably the last time in their life, are facing an emergency of monumental proportions.
Right.
All of a sudden, they can't remember their name. They can't remember their address. They can't tell you where they live. They are just faced with whether it's a medical emergency, watching their husband or wife of 50 years fall over with a sudden cardiac arrest, to their child burning up in a fire, to a horrible crash, and their daughter or son out on the roadway, all disfigured. And you, as that 911 operator, are the ones that have to calm the situation enough to get the information, to get the resources there. So my respect and heart goes out to them. So when I remember those events that were horrible and you can't unremember them, I think I was the one when they had no one else to talk to, when they couldn't call mama.
Right.
And mamas, fix everything.
Right. Yes.
When there was no mama to call, I was the one that helped them during that desperate time until we could get the resources to them. And that's why the 911 operators are so special to me. And I didn't realize that when I got into the business. Mm-hmm. I realized that as I was in the business, that, wow, I am the frantic call for help, and I am the one that's got to help and make them believe that things are going to get better, make them believe that we're going to do all that we can and the resources are going to get there. And the majority of the time, they get there in time to make a difference. Mm-hmm. And occasionally, you're the voice on the phone when your loved one's dead and they know it there. And that makes a remarkable impact. And for all the 911 operators that are listening to this, they're going, I'm there, I'm there, I'm there. That's what some of them are saying, that's what happened to me last shift at work.
For sure. And, a lot of that, the camaraderie and everything that's built within the center, but also everyone out in the field, we start connecting, coming together.
Absolutely.
And we learn each other's jobs, and that's what brings us together too. That's what bridges that gap. But also listening to voices. A lot of officers that I remember working with over the radio, very even, right, on their tone. But there's that moment where they switch, either goes higher or lower just a little bit, and that's when you know something is going on and everything is even more real, and you're at attention. You're like, what is going on? Tell me what is going on. But on the same sense, you hear me on the radio and you get used to my voice. If mine changes, you know things are going crazy in the center as well.
Absolutely. And do you know what's interesting? When you talk to our 911 operators, and you think, well, they take calls and they make sure an ambulance or a fire truck or a deputy arrives. Let me tell you about a story just a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
So a guy with mental health issues shoots and kills, murders his dad on a Sunday morning, and has the gun, and is making all these irrational statements as he's called 911 saying that I've shot and killed my dad. The next person that's going to face that irrational man who's already committed one murder, so what else has he got to lose at this point, is one of my deputies. When my deputy arrived that morning, that murderer met my deputy in the driveway without the gun because my 911 operator convinced him to set it down on the table and come outside.
Wow.
There was no deputy that had to face a gun of a rabid murderer because of that calm demeanor, that experienced 911 taker. This young lady has worked with us probably 20 years, and she had him saying, yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and she talked him out of the house with a gun in the house, and we didn't face potential death because of a 911 operator. That's how special they really are.
And those are those powerful stories that you hear about that just make so much of a difference. And there are a lot of folks that hear these, and some of them that aren't in public safety at all, but they hear these stories and it makes them want to be a part of something bigger than themselves, and they end up getting into public safety as well. So as we kind of shift a little bit to recruitment, how important is that topic to you, in general, but also for other, law enforcement officers, but especially the telecommunicators coming in and doing this as a career?
In a nutshell,
Mm-hmm.
in this environment today, as the baby boomers retire out, we know there are many more jobs than there are people to fill them. That includes truck drivers, nurses, teachers, doctors, law enforcement officers, and dispatchers. Dispatch is a very stressful job.
Mm-hmm.
911 is a very stressful job. Traditionally, it's young men and women that do this job. And then the young ladies have babies. And it's like, where do you find a 12-hour babysitter?
Right.
So it's very, very difficult to staff a 911 center for a litany of reasons, not the least of which is shift work. We continue to increase the pay. Now, in this area of the state, and I know this is a nationwide broadcast, we start dispatchers at $46,000 a year. We pay 100% of their college tuition at state rates. We have, obviously, a great retirement system and vacation hours. Next summer, the starting pay, my goal is to start dispatchers at $50,000 a year, beginning pay.
Wow.
Now think about this for a minute. So you're about to graduate from high school, or your son or daughter is, and the sheriff says, come to work for me at 18 as a dispatcher, and I'll pay a full ride for you to go to college and start you out at 50 grand a year a week after you graduate from high school. And if you want to say, well, I want to be a nurse or I want to be a school teacher, give me 4 or 5 years while you do college part-time.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you want to go off to another career, that's good. I've invested in you in the community with a bachelor's degree. You've invested your life, 5 years of it, saving lives. Believe it or not, the majority at that point will either stay or they will have fulfilled their obligation. And there's no mandate that they stay the full 5 years. If at 4 years they say, hey, I've got my bachelor's degree, the school is short, and I can go have that second grade class I want to teach, I'm going to have babies, and then that's tremendous. But that's what we're doing, because our 911 operators are the true first responders, and we pay them that way, and we have benefits that way because they're that special, and it's that hard to get folks to work in that pressure cooker.
Yeah, you just blew me away with that right there, because there's not a lot of people who are kind of talking about this. Of course they're talking about short staffing, but there isn't always what's the solution. Where do we go from there? How do we do this? And there, of course, is some places that have competitive pay and people are getting others or whichever, but how do we continue doing this? And I think, to me personally, just listening to you, that's a good plan. And that's the way to go, to continue having people coming in. And also, I'm sure you've noticed a lot of people when they come in, and once they do this job, and for you as well, it gets in your blood.
Absolutely.
And you want to continue doing it. That's why I haven't left public safety either. It's in my blood, and this is basically what I've born to do. I can feel it.
Well, Ricardo, if you look, because we always have overtime opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
I've got dispatchers that probably make $80,000, $100,000 a year dispatching. But it's that important. Now, someone will say, I can't believe you pay that much money. Let me ask you a question. What's your life worth? Because your life is in their hands
Right.
during that massive emergency. What's your life worth? And every now and then you run across somebody that say, I can't believe we pay firefighters what we pay, or law enforcement officers what we pay, or paramedics or 911 operators. Here's my experience. More people ask, why don't you make more? But in my 51 years of experience, I have not once at the scene of an emergency had someone say, this is too expensive. Or, are you a registered Republican or Democrat? Or, did you go to church on Sunday? In the midst of that emergency, everybody's glad to see you no matter what your personal beliefs are. And this is the most wonderful county and community. And I'll just bet most of the counties and communities across this nation are the same as ours, where people run in to help. People take these jobs to help. And at that point in time, nobody's complaining about the salaries we pay these emergency responders.
Right. No, exactly, because there's also a lot of different things that comes with this, and that also goes towards the mental health and wellness
Absolutely.
of every single person that is doing this job or is in this profession, this career. And that is one of the most important things too, I believe now, is there wasn't a lot of resources when we had started out, and now it seems like there's even more resources out there, and that's probably one of the most important things as well.
There really is. In fact, when we started, there were no resources.
Right.
If you couldn't stand the stress, you just had to leave. Now we have, employee assistance programs. We have what we call crisis intervention teams. We have a psychiatrist on board. We have mental health counselors to help through those very difficult times. And we should have those because we hire people physically and mentally well. We want to keep them physically and mentally well, and we want them to retire physically and mentally well. So the most important thing we can do is look out for and take care of our first responders. And when we do that, when we take care of them, they take care of all the emergencies. And you look at these young men and women that do this today, Ricardo, they do it for the same reason that you and I did it and do it. The love of the community, the love of wanting to give back, the love of wanting to be involved, the love of wanting to make a positive difference in someone's life. That's what we thrive on, is helping other people.
Perfect. Wow. That was very well said and so true as well. And as we go into the wrap-up of this episode, I wanted to touch on the comic strips that the Sheriff's Office puts out. However, I will save that part for another time because I do want to ask you this last question. And it is, if you, with your, and again, congratulations on 51 years of service. Thank you so much for everything that you do. But if you could go back in time, with the knowledge that you have now, and talk to yourself in the beginning, what advice would you give yourself?
Do you know, my wife and I married my high school sweetheart. That was my first wife. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's my current wife, but she was my first one. We talk about what would we do different. Mm-hmm. Well, do you know, we were so absolutely pleased with our marriage and our life and our kids and our jobs. I would tell you, I would do nothing different as far as a career path. And I worked hard to bring the agency forward. If there was some way we could have advanced the profession sooner than we did, because it was pretty archaic back in the beginning. Today, this sheriff's office has 10 professional accreditations. I challenge you, of the almost 18,000 law enforcement agencies in this nation, try to find another one with 10 professional accreditations. But if we had the resources and the money to pay for education and more salary early on, that's what I would have dreamed for.
Amazing. Thank you so much once again for everything. And for those who are watching, this has been an excellent episode. If you have any comments, questions, or you all ever want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that is going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. To get a hold of me, you can go to links.co/WTT podcast, and a big thanks to InDigital, as well as all of the Thin Gold line out there. Thank you for everything that you do, and thank you again, Sheriff Judd, for having me here at Polk County Sheriff's Office. This has been an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. May God bless you all.
Thank you. You as well. Have a good one, everyone.